Welcome to the Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. My name is Dr. Adriana Popescu. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and leader in the field of mental health, energy psychology, addiction, trauma, and empowerment. In this podcast, we will be exploring mental health from a variety of perspectives, from the spiritual to the shamanic and beyond. What if mental illness isn't everything we think it is? What if everything we see as a pathology is actually a possibility? What else is possible with mental health? Hi, everyone. Dr. Adriana Popescu here with you with another episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. I'm very excited to have with me as my guest today, Jeff Jones. Jeff didn't study addiction. He actually lived it. Growing up in an addicted family system fueled a lifelong quest to answer two vital questions. How do people actually get better? And how can the family become a stronger part of the solution? Armed with a master's in counseling and a powerhouse of credentials, including LPC, CACIII, and nutritional recovery coaching, Jeff spent years in mainstream recovery, seeing what worked and what was missing. In his new book, Rethinking Addiction, The New Family Recovery Solution, Jeff introduces a 3-phase blueprint designed to help families break free from shame-based language and rigid black and white thinking. He teaches and coaches families how to calm emotional reactions, set enforceable boundaries, and rebuild lasting trust through new healthy rhythms. Jeff's core premise is revolutionary. Families have the power to change their end of communication patterns so they can enable a healthy new dynamic. Welcome, Jeff.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate that intro.
Thank you. And thanks for being here. As always on the show, we like to start by getting to know our guests. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about you, your story, and how you came to be doing the work that you're doing.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I grew up in a family with addiction, and it wasn't my family of origin, but it was my mom's dad who was the alcoholic in the family, and he showered more love and attention upon me. On the other side, my mom hated him. There was some things that happened that she never spoke about, i.e., some kind of trauma. So it was incredibly confusing, and I was in the middle of some of these communication patterns. And then, when I became a therapist, I was drawn to, well, I want to learn more about families. I want to learn more about addiction, and eventually I want to learn more about trauma. And working in treatment centers and listening to other staff debrief, I started to feel the same kind of communication dynamics that I grew up with.
Yes, I know
And
that one.
I was like, oh my gosh, the pattern that we're trying to improve upon is actually being reinforced. Is That's kind of how it felt.
So here you are challenging the paradigm. So tell us then, let's look at traditional addiction treatment for a moment. What are some of the things that you found in your work that really don't help people and their families go through this process of recovery?
Well, one of the biggest, and it's been going on a long time, and it's really no one's fault, but that is this myopic focus on the person in the family that has the addiction, that has the problem, and the solution is really quite obvious. We all know what it is. They just need to fix the problem. They need to get into recovery. They need to do the work. Then the problem is fixed and the family can go back to normal. That's the myth. They can't go back to normal. I mean, they can, but that reinforces the problem. That makes it harder for the individual who really wants to stay in recovery long term. It makes it harder for them because all of these communication patterns with different people in the family are the same. that person who has gone to treatment, made all kinds of changes, they have learned a lot of new skills in how to live their life. And one of those skills is relationships and with their family, but their family hasn't learned those new skills. So they're kind of trying to do the same kind of relationship, which I see that as a huge problem. And it creates more of a divide between, the individual when he or she does get into recovery, and the family. It just creates more of a divide, and then a lot of the self-help programs are like, you, the addicted individual, you go this way, and then you, the family, you go this way, and it's like, never the twain shall meet unless they can afford, a good family therapist, which I know a lot of wonderful things has happened over time with family therapy sessions.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think you point out some really important aspects of this, which is one, there's a myth, first of all, like the whole identified patient concept, right? The person with the addiction is the problem. The family is not responsible for that or doesn't have a role in that. I think people think that, right, like addiction is a family disease. We talk about that. And a family is a system. One part of the system is going to affect what's going on in the other part. Like they're not they're so intertwined, they're not separate, right? You're really illustrating that. And then I think there's also this myth with treatment where families think, okay, we're going to send our troubled addict to treatment and they're going to get fixed in 30 days if they can even get 30 days approved of treatment, and they're going to come back healed, and like you said, we can go right back to, and I don't have to do any work. I, as the family member, I don't have to do any work because I'm not the problem.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
so many things that go sideways with this way of thinking.
Yeah. And I mean, that thinking is out in the culture, and I don't really see it as any person's fault that we have that, but that's the thinking we have. So one of the very first things I try to let people know is there's a lot of mixed messages out there about addiction. There's not just one definition, there's numerous definitions, and there's many different contributing factors. Like I was going to say causes, but cause and effect, it's like, oh, there's just one thing. And I like, trauma is huge, but there's other pieces other than trauma, and it's not all about trauma. It's about living a fulfilling life, and the addiction was some kind of a solution to a problem that when life was not fulfilling.
Exactly, right? So as we're busting some myths here about addiction and treatment, what else? What else have you seen that doesn't seem there's a prevailing, paradigm or mentality about it? Like I'm
Well,
thinking about the powerless piece, but what else do you
yeah,
think?
so there's black and white thinking, which black and white thinking is, I have an impulse, I get a thought, I think it's the truth, the whole truth, and I don't consider anything else. So that's just an example of black and white thinking. But in the addiction field, another mixed message that I have seen, and when I say mixed message, like, and I'm talking about this, know that I am not the one who is going to say, this is right and this is wrong. We get to choose, and I when I work with families, I want to support them to make their best choice and to let them know that there are multiple options. So the mixed message is, oh, you're addicted to this drug. Well, we have this other drug, and if you start taking this drug, then you can get off of that other drug, but FYI, you're going to get addicted to this other drug, but this is legal and that other one is illegal. So that I see as a mixed message. And I know that just in working with families, there's a lot of mixed messages. Like, for instance, a state where marijuana is legal, dad smokes pot, but Junior, the 15-year-old son, dad's saying, no, you're not old enough to smoke pot, but dad's smoking pot. So to Junior, that's a mixed message, another thing that I've, experienced a little bit when I was an interventionist is like getting a phone call from an Amish family. And they are saying, well, we want an intervention for our son. He's smoking cigarettes. And, it's like, how does an interventionist handle that? And it could go a number of different ways. And, because the Amish people, their belief system is very different than the dad who smokes pot and doesn't want his son to smoke pot. So this belief system is super important. And that goes a long way to how we define an addiction, what we think as a problem or not a problem. Is smoking cigarettes a problem? Is smoking pot a problem? Well, for a 15-year-old, that's much more of a problem than a 50-year-old, and smoking it once every now and then is much different than smoking a lot of it every day.
Exactly. Right. How are we even defining the problem? I think, speaking of beliefs, now there's another prevailing belief in the addiction treatment world where we talk about powerlessness, and I think if in certain models it's not just about the addict is powerless over their drug or behavior of choice, but also that the families to some degree are powerless. Can you speak to that?
Oh gosh, that is yeah, thank you for loading that one up there for me. So, I see that there are so many things that family members can do. And when I say families, a lot of times when I start working with people, I am working with the hub person in the family, which is oftentimes the mom, if the addicted individual is the son or daughter. But so, one, family members can begin to recognize patterns that in the culture, they're impersonal. Once they trickle down into the family, they get really personal. And family members, i.e., the mom or the hub person, is the person I am starting to work with first, for them to recognize their reactions and feel in their body what's going on, and to use their body kind of as a GPS to help them move more towards having a crafted response as opposed to an automatic reaction. So that's a huge amount of change. Like, I say that in what, 60 seconds or something, and that can be months and years, and well, that can be a lifetime of work, because it isn't like we just do it and it's done and we can check that off. It's like we can always improve and get better, and when we do that, we deepen our connection, our ability to really hear someone, hear what they're saying, hear what they're saying under the words. We can deepen our love, our concern with that family member, and we can rebuild trust on a new, like with new expectations.
So really how I hear what you're saying is that the family members, and by family, of course, we in quotes, it doesn't mean like your family of origin, your blood relatives. It could be you could be your chosen family, your partner, your created family, as well, right? So we're speaking broadly with that term. But the loved one, as a loved one of someone with an addiction, that these folks also need tools, right? Like you said before, the identified patient, the addict, is going to treatment. They're getting 1,001 tools. They're learning different ways to manage their emotions, to deal with cravings, to communicate differently. But the family members need those as well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so one of the things that I think is really important, there are a lot of treatment programs that do have a family program, where and they do it all different ways. Sometimes it's, just families meeting and learning about addiction and related topics like codependency and enabling and boundaries and tools. Like in the program where I work, we try to teach family members some basic emotional self-regulation tools, like how to calm your nervous system when your loved one is triggering you and you want to do
Yeah.
that automatic knee-jerk response, right? How can you calm your nervous system down so you can make a more thought out response? So what else? You said there are other things family members can do besides learning some tools to better communicate and to manage their own stuff. What else?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So the program that I have when I work with families, it's a three-phase program and it's about enabling health. And the first phase of it is enabling health within your own body. The second phase is enabling health within your relationships, and specifically that one family member who has the addiction. And the third phase is enabling health in how your family does family together. I very deliberately chose enabling health because in the addiction recovery space, enabling just means one thing. And I think we all know that, enabling means to make something easier. And when I'm conscious, I can be aware of enabling health, or I can be aware, oh, in this situation, I'm enabling an old pattern that actually reinforces the addiction. So, I you asked me about what can family members do. One, to recognize that just the language is shame based and it isn't anyone's fault. Like we've had that language for centuries, you know so there are many things stacked against families, because the language, the mixed messages, and even what we think of as solutions, as we were talking about before, the solution is just fixing one person, when actually that can happen over and over and over again, and that person never gets better. And so I've heard of people going to treatment 20, 30 plus times. And I'm kind of going, well, do any of us think that there's room for improvement on how we're doing this here? So, and when I say that, the other thing that I can, just touch on here is, part of my background is training with the Academy for Addiction and Mental Health Nutrition. And so when I started really grasping the importance of a food plan and when a person eats and protein, like throughout the day, specifically when someone is in early recovery, their nutrients have been depleted by the addiction. And so, very nutrient dense food is great, but is that enough? Well, I don't think so in a general sense. And part of the core of my program comes from the book 7 Weeks to Sobriety. And it is talking about amino acids and supplements, and actually identifying a person's alcohol biotype, and then putting together a plan to address that specific alcohol biotype. And so food, amino acids, supplements, and family members can learn this, and they can be doing this themselves, because one of the biggest things for change, any kind of change, is our brain health, and what we are telling ourselves, that self-talk. And if I keep telling myself I'm powerless, like, what does that do?
It
What
makes you
does that do?
powerless. It makes you that.
I'm the victim.
Yeah.
I'm the victim. And that addicted individual, that they are the problem. And I am like, that's not helpful. That, and family members have power, and just like whatever we can do to help change our brain is going to make it so much easier for our change, whether we are talking about any mental health illness, addiction, or the symptoms that come from living with addiction. So just drinking water on a regular basis, water lubricates the brain, and learning this pro recovery diet and doing it themselves. It's essentially, protein, whole grains, I mean, pretty basic. Of course, it can be nuanced, but family members can be doing that. And as they learn more and more about a bionutritional approach to healing, when their loved one is open to a new conversation about a new perspective of recovery, here it is.
Right. I feel like we still have a long way to go in terms of, I mean, just in general for the general population, and then of course in this area as well, like just educating people about their own physical health, brain health, gut health, the role that the gut plays. Here we are trying to give people who are serotonin, deficient. We want to give them SSRIs. How about we just like work with like what they're eating? Um, and find natural ways to do that, or supplements or things like that. There's I think there's often this idea of the shortcut, right? And like, I want the quick fix, I want the shortcut. But the reality
Yeah.
is that if your body has become dysregulated because of not taking care of it, it's not going to be an overnight fix. They're going to be healthier habits you're going to need to learn, that involve how to better take care of your body and how to recognize even basic things like hunger cues, right? We talk
Oh my
about
gosh.
HALT,
Yeah.
hungry, angry, lonely, tired, these as being like major relapse triggers. But how many people don't even recognize the hunger signals when they're there? And then they don't eat. Their blood sugar gets low, and their brain has learned, especially if they're an alcoholic, right? Their brain has learned, oh, if the blood sugar is low, the quickest way to get glucose to the brain, drink alcohol. And so people will have cravings to drink when in fact their blood sugar is low, and what they really need is like some protein or something that will like sustain the blood sugar levels.
So, from what I have heard from some AA sponsors, is they encourage their sponsees to carry Jolly Ranchers or sugar in their pocket. Like, if you feel like you're going to drink, that you have some sugar, and so that actually deepens or reinforces the reward pathway that the drug or alcohol carved out. And yeah, it's a temporary fix for the moment, but it doesn't do anything, to heal the reward pathway. Where I, when I started learning this stuff about food and amino acids and supplements, one of the things that I learned, and this is just anecdotal, but it was about relapse, and so I would always ask when someone would say, "Well, I relapsed," I would go, "Oh, think back to that day when you relapsed, and when was the last time you had food?" And Adriana, it's been 100% that it was more than 4 hours or they didn't have food. So, having, like, protein snacks throughout out the day, I think can be wonderful. One of the things that I have done is help people come up with a rel like, I call it like a relapse kit, but in actuality, it's like some capsules of glutamine, some protein bars, a hard-boiled egg, whatever, you know, but actually to have snacks readily available, and that will help maintain the blood sugar, the blood sugar spike, which, as you mentioned, the drop in blood sugar can be a calling out for, oh, I need that fix my brain is used to having.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's such a and I think what can happen for folks is they can get overwhelmed because it can get rather complex and nuanced, but you don't need to become an expert. Like you said, there're just some super basic things you can do, eating regularly every 3, 4, whatever that, the time your body needs, eating regularly, having those protein snacks available, taking some supplements. Like it doesn't have to be a super complicated thing. But just to bring to people's awareness how important this piece of it is. Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, you're right. It isn't super complicated, and the other side of that is I can't tell you how many people have wanted to argue with me about, but Jeff, I have a good diet, and so there is a whole lot to the bionutritional repair piece. And actually the website, and I'll say a website, my addiction nutrition mentor Christina Vasilok has the website eatingproteinsaveslives.org. A lot of great free information on there, and she has probably taught 300 professionals, therapists, doctors, various kinds of healer, and some people who, they just have found this and they just want to learn more about how the nuts and bolts of it work for themselves. And they're like, they don't have clients. But so that website, it has a huge amount of information on there about food. Her website where she trains therapists is aminoacidtherapy.com. And so that is a helpful piece for sure. I don't see that as, you know, the solution, but I see that as a factor that can be a part of a person's recovery plan. And even if amino acids and supplements are outside of their belief system, we all eat food. And there's a lot of food out there that's ultra processed. I mean, it seems like it's designed in a chem lab to actually fire the same kind of addiction process, and I don't think that is really helpful for the healing brain.
No, it's not. The microplastics and the toxins and the pesticides and everything. Yes, I mean our bodies. It's a lot harder when you have all that in your system for your body to heal and to do the things that it's naturally meant to do. So, lots of material there. Thank you for giving us those resources. We'll be sure to put them in the show notes. Um, Jeff, what else can you tell us about your book, your program? What else would you like our audience to know about this?
Yeah. So, well, you mentioned the book. The book can be gotten on my website.
And let's give the
Um,
title for people who might be listening. Yeah, yeah, I want to jot it down right now.
the website
The
or
name of
the
your
book?
book. Yeah, because they'll I
Oh,
said it
the
in the
name of the
beginning,
book
but they've
is
probably forgotten by now.
Yeah, the name of the book is Rethinking Addiction: The New Family Recovery Solution. And it's on Amazon Kindle right now. Eventually, it'll be paperback on Amazon, but I have no idea when. But it is on my website, and which can direct them to Amazon if they want a Kindle, or it can direct them to a place where they can get a print on demand paperback book. Um, so that is something that I really try to identify. You know, mixed messages lead to black and white thinking, and that when we use both and thinking, which is essentially two things can be true at the same time, or there can be multiple truths in multiple perspectives. And when we have a both and decision making model to actually slow us down, and we can go through a process to where we can make our best decision. So that's the first four chapters. The next three are is the enabling health three-phase model. And then, at the end I have some question and answer, and how family member I mean, the whole goal here in my mind is that family members educate themselves with the traditional process of recovery, but then educate themselves with what I call the expanded process that includes some of these mixed messages, that includes, like the Egyptians thought that there was a cure for addiction, and that cure was shaming and flogging. And the Turks thought there was a cure, and it was pouring molten lead down the throat of the drunkard. And the Greeks, they didn't think there was a cure, but they made goblets and put amethyst stone around the rim, with the idea that when the alcohol ran over the amethyst stone, that they would get less drunk. So it was an avoidance kind of thing. So there's all this history that's like today we would think any of that is crazy. Maybe not the shaming, because that still occurs quite a bit. Um, but it's like it wasn't that long ago when addiction was thought of as a moral failing. You
Oh, and
know,
still is in some circle. I think a lot of people still think that actually.
yeah, and it gets back to the culture that we live in that has the belief systems, kind of like the story of the Amish people. They have one belief system, and the dad who, he lives in a state and he that where it's legal to smoke pot, and it's like it's no big deal, you know. But you, Junior, with the teenage brain, your brain's just developing, and you could get in a big problem with this. With That's all true. Teenagers and young people with a developing brain, as you know, they are much more vulnerable to, you know moving into addiction. I mean, their brain is like they're always looking for the dopamine hit. They get bored easy, and it's part of their brain, the way their brain is developing. So, and if they live in an environment that is enabling the problem, they have peers that are smoking pot and doing all the stuff, which, that happens quite often. Um, it's like then they are going to be more vulnerable. But then having a dad, if he's smoking pot too, it's like that's difficult for Junior to navigate. Well, it isn't really difficult. Junior's going to make the decision, and I think we both know what decision he's going to make.
Right. Right. It sure is a complex topic. And I think a lot of family, in my experience, they just get overwhelmed. They're like, I don't know, because you're right. There isn't really a clear guide. There isn't there, there's one program for family members in the self-help kind of world, and that model doesn't fit everybody. It doesn't, the Al-Anon and stuff doesn't always, not everybody resonates with it, just like not everybody resonates with AA or smart recovery or whatever the different, perspectives are. So I really love that you're presenting some straightforward basic information. It doesn't sound super complicated. It sounds like things that family members can start to do, even if it's like baby steps, right? Like small steps they can take to better care for themselves and their health, and to start to communicate differently, to see things differently, right? It requires a shift in perspective. It seems really manageable. I like that your program you're laying out here has pragmatic, practical steps people can take. Because one of the things that we see, just one last thing, one of the things we see with family members often is they're so burnt out. They're so exhausted from the constant, the over and over. They get, their loved one gets clean and then they fall off the wagon and then they're, or the 20 times in rehab. So it's tough.
So right now I am in the middle of doing this master class, and the master class is free, b- but I'm recording a lot of this stuff, and eventually that will be a sequenced program that people can kind of come into whenever they want. And my aim here is for people, family members specifically, to be able to get a overview perspective of a healing arc, and how they can be a part of it and get that perspective as early as possible, like well before their addicted family member has gone to treatment dozens of times, you know, because it's so much easier. And my whole goal is to help family members make their best decisions, because there are quite a few decisions that need to be made. But once they get to the point where they're burnt out, they just don't want to have anything to do with it. They've seen their addicted family member go in and out of treatment multiple times. I mean, when it's a child, it's like the mom's the last one to give up, as I'm sure you know. And oftentimes other people in the family, they are so over it, and they pull away. They have their own boundaries. They blame. They have their own negative self-talk about it, and it makes it so much more difficult. So, family members, like when they see a larger picture, this whole healing arc, there are so many decisions that they can make. And so, I would really like, to be on the prevention end of things. The reality is, I, serve people that find me. And, that's about all I can do right now. And I really appreciate being on your podcast, because this is one way that people may be able to find me, is me kind of having recorded conversations and them getting out into the world. So thank you for having me.
Oh, well, thank you for being here, and that's exactly the point of this podcast, right? Is to educate, to get information out there, to let people know there is more, especially this angle, the alternative, perspectives on mental health. It's like to let people know that there is more available than just the prevailing kind of Western medicine, psychiatric treatment paradigm. There's a lot more out there available to people, some of which might even be more effective or might work better for you and your circumstances, your family, your loved one who's struggling with addiction. So, Jeff, if people want to find you, where do they go?
It would be my website, thefamilyrecoverysolution.com.
Fantastic. So thanks again for being here. Thank you, audience. for tuning in today. If you've liked this podcast and found this info useful, please do share it, like, comment, subscribe, rate it, review. All these things will help get our numbers up so that we can get this information out there in more hands, of the hands of people who are looking for this. So thanks so much, everyone. Thank you, Jeff, and we'll see you next time on the show.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. This has been Dr. Adriana Popescu. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share with others. To find out more about me, my guests, and more, please visit my website at adrianapopescu.org. See you next time.